And being in high school is also a social development time. And if you're just hanging around the house, whoa, you're missing a lot more than like just algebra and literature. You're missing developing socially, because you think about high school, most people talk about how their teachers and their coaches and things were the biggest influence of their life. And so if kids are hanging out in their pajamas, oh my gosh, you're missing, you will be light years behind. And that's scary to me.
Welcome to the Elevated Hope Project, a podcast dedicated to celebrating stories of resilience, transformation, and second chances. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Elevated Education, an organization that serves at-risk students through innovative schools like East Point High School, Elevated Academy, and Accelerated Learning Center. At Elevated Education, we believe in the power of education to change lives and create hope where it's needed most. KarIn, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We're really excited. I mean, you're clearly not one of our students. You're not one of our graduates, but this podcast is about telling stories that can bring people hope and inspire them to keep moving forward, to be resilient in their life, because we all know that continuing to show up, continuing to put in the work is what ultimately will lead our students to success and crossing a finish line of getting their high school diploma and on with their life to become productive and successful. So you are our second staff interview, I believe. And it's an honor to have you on here.
It's wonderful to be on this staff, to be on this team doing what we do is absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to do is just kind of walk through your life story. And we'll ask questions as we go. And you can start as early on in your life as you want to, that kind of leads up to today and all the different paths you've been down and what motivated you and inspired you to keep moving forward in your life. So
I'd be happy to tell.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Well, the thing I think that surprises people when they know me is that my family came out of just a desperate situation. My dad was mentally unstable. He was violent, and we ended up homeless. So we've lived in his car. We've lived in motels and trailers and just drugged from state to state. And so I was 3 when a church actually helped rescue my mom from this situation. We were in this motel. And then we went to Little Rock, and we lived in the housing project. So we were just around poverty always. And the thing is when you're around poverty, that's all kids know. They just know those blocks around, like our mom never, she started working really hard, but she never took us to a library. She never took us to a museum. And so kids, you have a really limited view of just what's around you. But my mom did the most remarkable thing, because my mom's would dress us all up, and we would drive out of the projects every Sunday and go to a really fancy church. And so we saw how people could dress and how they were happily married, or they went to college and they went on vacations. We saw how these other people lived. And even though we were in a really rough situation, that gave us a vision about that. So I think that would really surprise people to know when they meet my family where we actually came from, because it was absolute desperation. And my mom had not really had much education, so she wasn't really confident about things like that. And we didn't have books in our house. We didn't have games in our house, things like that. And you don't realize until you get in school and you're around other kids or these kids at church, you think, oh my gosh, they played Little League. Like, we didn't even know that existed. They've had piano lessons. They know gymnastics. Like, as kids, we didn't even know that other kids lived like that, or that your mom read books to you or anything like that. So you're farther behind than you realize, because you don't even know what's out there. Mm-hmm. So I think that would be something that would be surprising if someone met our family, because you would never dream that we came from that kind of a situation. But our mom did 2 cool things. She drove us out to this nice church so we could see how other people live. But my mom said, when we were living in the projects, and I mean, we were really, really poor. I don't mean like kind of, I mean like it was desperate. But my mom said, we don't belong here and we're not staying. And I remember as a little kid thinking, what does she mean? What does she mean? Because when you're living like this and you see these other people here, you can't imagine how you'd get there. And but she was right. We didn't stay. And just over years of her work, and she was able to buy a little house. But my sisters and I all built a really neat life. None of them went back to repeat that cycle of domestic violence. Everybody owns a home. 2 sisters did job training, which I highly recommend kids getting work training. Not college isn't for everybody. But 2 of my sisters studied like business administration and just built a really nice career for themselves and were homeowners and stuff. And then my other sister and I, we went away to college and we were so broke and we were so behind, but we did it. And so anyway, I would think that would be the big deal is our mom, the example, she said that we weren't going to stay trapped in poverty, even though that was our reality for many years, and letting us see what other people's lives were like out there. So those 2 things.
That's fascinating. I want to go back to how your mom took you to church to see how other people live, right? Did you feel like an observer or a participant in that setting?
Well, we knew we really belonged there, but we couldn't dress like anyone else. It was funny because we'd have on these little homemade dresses, my Aunt made. But I would see these really well-dressed girls come in kids' church, with these really nice outfits. And those people didn't know a lot of our situation, or they would have helped more. Like later, people realized, oh, these kids can't go to camp, and they would try to help us go to camp. But some families from church began to give us bags of hand-me-downs. And so that was really fun because I would see this girl, Cindy Huffman, she'd come in kids' church all dressed up. And I would think, wow, that's so cute. And next year, I'm going to be wearing that. And I'm still friends with Cindy Huffman, and I still like what she wears. But people would help us to dress that way. And my mom knew how to present herself with self-respect. And so even though we did always feel less than and behind, it wasn't because they made us feel like that, because we knew the situation. But it gave us the opportunity to learn how to carry ourselves and how to set goals and how to be happily married and all those things that we got to see. Because that had nothing to do with the people we lived around. They're yelling at each other, throwing beer cans in the yard and all this mess. But we set our eyes on that. And then school was huge. I was almost 7. I don't know why, but I was almost 7 when I first went to school. I never went to kindergarten or preschool. I was in 1st grade, almost 7, and I couldn't read, I couldn't write. And I remember the first day of 1st grade and just thinking, I love this. To be in a room where there was a grown-up in charge, because my mom was always at work. I just couldn't believe the things that were on the board, the way the teacher dressed. I absolutely loved it. But I was so behind, and I was almost 7. And so I didn't realize that I was actually older than those other kids. So all my life I've thought I was smarter than everybody else. But I realized later it's like, oh, I was a year farther down the road. I just was completely uneducated. But school was huge because education just changes everything. And I couldn't learn enough. Like I wanted to be on the front row. My little hand was always up. I wanted to be a teacher's pet, which I was. And, or at least I think I always was. I might have been just deeper line. But I couldn't learn enough. And I'm still that way. Like, I'm just starving to learn. But I was behind in reading. So I'm talking very, very fast. We were so behind in reading because we didn't have any books, or nobody worked with us on that. So even though I did well in like little reading classes at school, I was always embarrassed of how I would read out loud because I felt I read really slow and stuff, even all through college. I just thought I was going to die when I saw college textbooks, and they'd say like read like 18 chapters before Thursday. And I would think, are you kidding me? So reading was the hardest part. And it took me until I was in college and I started reading C.S. Lewis that I finally got hooked and just couldn't stop reading. And I wish I could give that gift to struggling kids, for that light to come on to really start reading. Because once you can start reading at that level, now you can read anything, everything, biographies and history and everything. And so school was a huge change for my sisters and I. We all loved school because it was like we knew it was our door out, that we're getting out of this mess and school is going to get us out of it. And so I had some really neat teachers that invested in me and stuff.
Yeah, I bet. Do you remember any pivotal moments on teachers that
Well,
made
several.
impact?
My third grade teacher literally changed my life, and I don't know why. But when I was in third grade, my third grade teacher took me to a movie, and I had never seen a movie. I've never been to a theater. It was sweet, so I wanted to cry because I don't know why she did this. But Mrs. Bennett, she was this really sassy woman from Connecticut, and she was helping these really poor kids in Arkansas. She would scream, "Think, think." She'd scream, and spit would shoot out of her mouth, and she was bright red. She'd write on the board, "Think." It was so hilarious. But anyway, she was wonderful to me, and she talked about bigger ideas than we had ever known. And it was this big movie musical, Oliver, that was Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist, and she took me to see Oliver in the theater. And she took me to lunch. Now, I'd never done anything like this in my life. And she said, "You know what, let's go to lunch. You can go anywhere you want." I was lucky. And I was like, "Can we go to Burger King?" Because I'd seen Burger King on TV. And I thought, because my family never did something like that. We were that poor. And so I wanted a Whopper and a milkshake because I had seen Eva commercials. So here I was and out on my big date in third grade and went to a movie with her. But she also took me to a play. Late the very next year, she took me to my first play, and then she had me over to spend the weekend at least twice at her house. And I don't know to this day why that third grade teacher did that, but I really thank God because it really it made me see the world bigger and bigger. And it was probably the first time I got to feel like I was special. It was just me and her, and it was really cool.
Wow, what a huge gesture for her to make. I'm sure she saw something in you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually tried to find her on Facebook later just to let her know how my life turned out awesome. And she would have never believed that 'cause she actually drove into the projects to pick me up and take me. So she saw where we were living and what our life was like. And I always thought, I wish Mrs. Bennett knew.
You ever found her?
Maybe she'll be listening to this podcast. Yeah. No, she was older than my mom, so I don't think so. But I tried to find her. So I just try to be like her now, and find a kid that I need to invest in. So she's my hero. Anyway, but I had several teachers that really invested heavily in me, and it's always like if this teacher speaks vision into you, it's really shocking because my mom never did. I mean, she was just like, got to go to work, got to pay bills, we've got to get the laundry done, we've got to get groceries bought. I mean, that was just, my mom was a single mom with a family of 5. So she never said like, "Oh, you're so special," and "Oh, let's hear what you did at school." It was like, "Get out of the way, we've got to get dinner on the table." That was Mom. So it was amazing.
And you were in a poverty situation, and your mom was saying to you guys consistently, "We don't belong here," right?
No, she probably only said that once.
Oh.
And my sisters have no memory of her saying that. So yeah, I held on to that.
I envy you.
Mm-hmm. Because I wondered what she meant, that we didn't belong and we wouldn't stay. So later when we've started just constantly taking steps out of that, I thought, oh, she knew. She knew.
Wow. What I was thinking, and maybe this question doesn't make as much sense anymore, is we know there's tons of kids that are in that same situation, is that they don't have an adult telling them, "We don't belong here." And can you imagine what they're up against and how different that is for them?
And that's been one of the real messages of my heart, my life. I used to go into schools in California and do career day. And that would be one of the things I would teach is like, no matter how poor your family was, that doesn't define your future. No matter how uneducated your family was, that doesn't define your future. My grandpa, my mom, they never had opportunity for education or to travel or things like that. And I've done all of that. So that's one of my goals is teaching younger kids. Don't let anything that you came from or that you're surrounded by define your potential, because just start leaping forward and you're going to get there. And reading has a lot to do with that. If you can read about something, you will probably go do it. But if you don't read about it, you probably won't.
Because you don't even know about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They say a lot of kids in poverty don't leave the few blocks around their house. And I used to live in California, and they said kids in poverty in LA, or like we were in Long Beach, a lot of those kids have never seen the beach. And that absolutely devastated me because I thought it's only like 30, 40 minutes away. But when you're trapped in that, you don't know what's out there. And that hit me so hard that if I could use my life to speak into kids to say, oh, everything that's out there, you can actually go live in it. You just have to get out of these blocks around you. Find some cool people who will invest in you.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
it's hard to know what to ask because her story kind of speaks for itself. You're now in education. You have been. It's just hilarious. Yeah. But that wasn't really your goal, right? So how'd you land here?
Well, you know what's funny? My husband and I were laughing about this yesterday. Is for some reason I just throw myself into things that I don't know anything about. I'm not trained to do, but I think I'll probably figure it out. And so in my life, like I moved to California, I studied acting, I studied comedy, which that kind of made sense. But then I ended up on staff at a church and going into full-time ministry, and that shocked me. Never saw that coming. And then ended up being a school teacher. I didn't see that coming. So I always throw myself into things that I know nothing about. And then it's like, okay, now I've got to make it. You know, I have to make this work. And so anyway, I don't know why I always jump in the deep end. But it probably has a lot to do with me even as a kid, was I just couldn't stand to just stay with. If somebody holds you down and says you have to stay here, I'm thinking, I'm not staying.
Yeah.
I want to do stuff.
Yeah. It sounds like really like you said, reading a book when you know it exists. And in your mind, as soon as you learn something is out there, you want to go try it. You want to go figure it out. So you're never missing out on all the opportunities.
Right. Yeah, I refuse to miss anything. When we were kids at church, my favorite thing ever was missionaries would come and tell their stories. And as a little kid, and we didn't go to movies, so that was like the coolest thing in the world. And I remember as a little kid thinking, I've never been on a trip anywhere, but I'm going to Africa one day, you know. And I really have gone to Africa 3 times, and it's just like, if it's out there. So I would say education and having grown-ups that speak hope into you, you know, it's really surprising what you can look back and go, how did I get here?
How many people, I don't know if this is a fair question, but how many people in your life do you think you've been able to impact simply because you can connect with them on a level that most people cannot?
Well, I've had a lot of opportunity to do that, so the numbers would be kind of large, but it would be kind of shocking. I was a youth pastor in California for 2 different groups. So I know I poured my heart into all those kids, and then I worked with a youth group in Tennessee. And I've done a lot of stuff because of a lot of heartbreak in my life, where I've been involved in recovery groups for people, like divorce recovery and things, and even speaking at like homeless shelters, women's homes, and things like that. One of the things that shocked me in Long Beach, they asked me to speak at the men's home at the rescue mission. And I remember being really uncomfortable and thinking, those men aren't like me. I'm like this perky blonde woman. But I began to share the story about my dad's violence and being homeless. And it had never occurred to me that what those men immediately did was they identified with me as a kid, not my dad, the broken man. And those men were so responsive to that because it touched them about them as a kid with their horrible dads and the things they had been through. And that had never even entered my mind. So, I mean, it would be, it would sound weird, but I would have to say thousands, because I've probably been for like over 20 or 30 years sharing about different things in my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I just throw myself out there and tell people my stories all the time.
You do.
You're a handwriter lost. Yeah, I'm heading through a lot of brokenness, but I'm really glad to be on this side of it.
Yeah. And you are.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like you've kind of carried, that one thing you remember your mom saying is, you don't belong here. Sounds like that's touched all aspects of your life, and then also what you're able to say to others. You don't belong here. You don't belong in this current situation.
Right.
Let's see what the next thing is.
Right. And I think that's the most important thing to tell kids is we have students in our organization that I could just wait for these kids. They're sleeping on a couch. They've been in shelters. They've been in and out of foster care. And they don't even know someone like my mom. At least my mom was a stable person. And so if I could say anything to them, it's like, don't let this define who you're about to become. You have to find grown-ups like us who will speak that into them. That's why I love this group. I can't believe our schools do what we do.
Yeah, and in your current role, you're kind of the first contact that potentially new families are reaching out to, or you're reaching out to them. And you're probably hearing from a lot of parents who are desperate to find something to help their child, as well as students directly that you're interacting with that are just trying to find a way out. What what are those conversations like? What is it that you're saying to for them to see what that vision is of that future, and that there is hope, that all is not lost and hopeless? What are the walk us through some of the what that conversation would be?
Wait, you might, before you start on that path, could maybe have you describe from your perspective what your job is and what you're responsible for, and then go into that?
My job here, and I absolutely love it, is I do student enrollment. So when someone sees our ads on social media and they reach out to our organization, I'm the one that calls them, and I love it. And I send them information about our schools, and I just love saying it's free, it's tuition free, it's a charter school, you get a mentor. I mean, everything about what we do is special. So I'm glad I'm the one that gets to say that to them. And I've had a lot of kids even text me later and say, you were the nicest grown up I've ever talked to. And you just think, what have they been through? So I send them information on our schools and how to enroll, and how I can help them, how we're going to find out what credits they need, and we're going to get them on track to graduate. And I also stop and I tell them, you got to graduate. And I tell them why. I said, listen to this. And it just shocks them when I tell them how important graduating is, or if they don't, how it's going to cost them so much. And so it's fun for me to get to be that first voice that's kind and friendly. Yeah.
Maybe better re-ask your question then, since I interrupted you.
No, I got you. So I was just curious, when you're talking to those parents that are desperate, students who are desperate to work their way out of whatever situation they're in, what is it that you're telling them to give them that vision and that sense of hope?
First, I tell them we can help, and this is what we do all the time. Like I talked to her mom last night, and she was just at the end, just concerned for her son. What's his future going to be if she can't get him off the couch and she can't get him, to tell her, this is what we do. We help kids, and we have a really high graduation rate. And just to say that to them and to say, you're not failing. I actually hear that story from parents a lot. That a lot of kids are just paralyzed by life. They're so overwhelmed, but let's get them to take this step. And one of the things I like to do is, if I can get them to go to one of our learning centers and meet our staff, that really, really helps. And just say, hey, pop over there, see how you do it. Go meet the team, because our team is a bunch of role models. Like, they're just such wonderful mentors. I know if that kid walks in the room, they're going to want to give it a chance,
Yeah.
But with a lot of kids, when I talk to the students, they've been knocked down. I mean, they've slept on somebody's couch, they've lived with their grandma, they've been kicked out of the house, things like that. And so I just try to kind of nurture them and focus it on, this is about your earning potential. And if you can knock out this one thing, it's going to make changes for you. And with the parents, they're just bewildered. They're afraid for their kids. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, because of COVID, I don't know what it was like before COVID.
Yeah.
But I feel like kids are 2 years behind on everything, and it's not their fault. And they stayed home, and now they're having a hard time getting back out,
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're talking to both the parent and the student, sometimes, maybe both in a family situation, is and probably instilling motivation and inspiration at both levels, right? Did you anticipate it being that way when you started this role, or do you think you would really just be talking to students or parents?
Yeah, I never thought that the kids are so respectable. I'm surprised how many, it's the kids I talk to mostly. Okay. They see the ads, and if it's a parent, the kid already has an advocate, so that's awesome. But a lot of times it is the student, and I'm surprised how respectful they are, and how you can tell they're just really nervous. Like, life is huge. What am I doing? So when I begin to kind of speak into that, they just really respond. But they're always really grateful and stuff. And I'm surprised, or maybe I'm not, how really grown up some of these kids are, because they have to be, because they are like 17 and working full time and trying to figure out how to go to school. So yeah, I'm surprised how many kids I get to talk to. Yeah, I love that.
What are some other things that have shocked you that you didn't anticipate in this group, this generation of kids who are out of school, needing to get back into school? Anything that's surprised or shocked you?
I would think the thing that shocks me, I mean, it makes you kind of, is how many parents say that the kid has just been on the couch and in their pajamas, to which I'm thinking, you need to kick them out of the house because they're set up for distraction. How do you hold down a job if you don't get up and get dressed and get out of the house? And so that's the thing that shocks me is that we have a generation of kids that won't have a work ethic. If they don't have school goals, they won't have work goals. And that's terrifying because the world is actually really complicated. So you got to throw yourself out there and start learning everything as fast as you can. But to think that when parents say like, you know, they're years behind and I can't get them out of the house and stuff, you think then they're set up to never hold down a job. They won't have that sense of pride and accomplishment. And there's just so many things about that that motivates you to go to the next step or to be around good people that begin to motivate you. So I think that's the thing that's shocking is how many kids have been allowed to be homebound. And being in high school is also a social development time. And if you're just hanging around the house, whoa, you're missing a lot more than like just algebra and literature. You're missing developing socially, you know, because you think about high school, most people talk about how their teachers and their coaches and things were the biggest influence of their life. And so if kids are hanging out in their pajamas, oh my gosh, you know, you're missing, you will be light years behind. And that's scary to me. Well, when I do get to really talk to the kids, I talk to them about getting ready for the workforce. And that is about showing up, you know, and I tell them to, you know, get down to the learning center if you can. Now, we have a lot of students who enroll with us who are on the outskirts. They can't get to one of our centers. But I talk to them about how we have Mr. Kofi and he helps them with career and stuff. Because that's a big deal. In high school, I never had someone like that speak to me and say, hey, if you're really good at this, what if you could get paid for that? And so telling those kids, get down there because our role models are, you know, they're going to mentor you and then you can talk to them about what's next for you. And I think I'm one of the first people that has said that to the kids, what's next right after this? And we're going to help you with that. You know, we want to talk to you about those next steps. So, what was the question?
Yeah, that was around just the importance of being there in person and then the impact that their peers and the mentors bring to that. Yeah. How important that is. Do you have, so I know you mentioned, you know, the impact your mom had and the impact your third grade teacher. Was there anyone else along the way that really had that impact on you? And could you tell us about that?
Well, I would say it would be almost everybody. Like every time I met a grown up that would invest in me, I was there. And I grew up never having a dad, and I wanted a dad more than anything. And so when I would spend the night at my friend's house, I remember this one friend came in and she goes, did you come over here to spend the night with me or talk to my dad? And I remember thinking, I want to talk to your dad. So I always interviewed everybody I met. And every youth teacher, every church teacher, every school teacher. I had a choir director in high school that was incredible, that invested and spoke a lot of vision to me. And she was really life-changing choir. And I'm trying to think, job managers. I mean, I always just, every time I met someone, I think, how does this whole company work? How does this work? How'd you figure this out? You know? And so I've always wanted to interview everyone to find out where did they come from? How did they get here? And what can I learn from them? So I don't know, it'd be hundreds of people, but a lot of my friends' parents were key. And this one girl, she was the only child, and they had a motorhome. And my family never went anywhere. We broke single mom. We never went anywhere except go out to my grandpa's house or go to church camp. But these people took me on a 2-week vacation in a motorhome. And I got to see Colorado and California and all this stuff. And to this day, I look back and I think, why did they take me on vacation? And I got to do it twice. So I saw most of the states. I spent weeks in this motorhome going all over them. And then I would come home to my family who we never went anywhere, you know. And even when I traveled as a grown-up, I would always send them postcards. Like even from Kenya or from England and stuff, I'd send them postcards. Because I remember her dad teaching me how to read the map. And then mom telling me about reading tour books and, you know, the places that we were going to go visit. So that was kind of a really big thing that really invested heavily.
It sounds like there's so many stories of people who were investing in you and you never quite understood why, right? And so, but if you're really, really honest and like dig deep, you probably do know why. And so if you're going to tell like a young person who was in your situation, what do you think you were doing? Or
Fun. I'm fun. You know, I swear I think people just take me along places because I'm fun. And it's funny too, I've always had a lot of very rich friends. And I've had people say, how do you have so many friends that are this wealthy? I said, I don't know. I think it's just because I'm fun. I'm fun to be around.
so that's your advice to young groups? Be fun.
Well, I would think, well, be fun, but also be interested. I think it's because I was so passionately interested in everything that I was so full of questions and full of a sensitive nature that they said, well, come with us, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that was it, was I was always so curious. And I've heard that too about people who are really successful. They love to share it with someone who's curious about it. You know, like don't be shy to ask people to mentor you because they might want to invest in somebody. And I would say that's really true.
And we have people here that are choosing the mentor.
Yeah. I love that.
That's special.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sounds like you were really comfortable, and owned that space of not knowing. Like, you know, a lot of people aren't comfortable with like, I just want to know things and have knowledge. And you lived in that space of, I don't know things. I want to keep learning.
I'm doing it right now.
Yeah.
I'm learning Spanish at 65 and I'm horrible at it, but it's hilarious because I'm involved in this English as a second language thing I'm doing. And I thought, well, if they can learn English and struggle, I should struggle too and learn Spanish. And so I've thrown myself into learning Spanish. I've studied to write novels and I'm working on a novel project with a writing partner right now. And I like to just throw myself out there. But even with the novel thing, my sister and I, we went to New York and we met all these publishers and editors. I didn't know what I was doing, but I just threw myself in there to learn, you know. So, I know.
I was watching a video the other day and I don't remember who it was. So I'll give credit to them if I can remember who it was. And they were saying that a lot of people think resilience is pushing through to get to something like a reward at the end, like the prize, the win, right? But really resilience is how long can you stay in the ambiguity? How long can you stay in the unknown? That's resilience. And it sounds like that's kind of defines your life.
I just never want to miss something. And so I just never wanted to play it safe and stay. Like even when I go back to visit where I grew up and stuff, and I got to speak at my high school class reunion, which was a surprise. You know, think about doing things like that. But to think there are people that are content to just live right around where they went to high school, you know, and that's okay. But I just never had that. I was just always too curious. I think for me, a part of my resilience is knowing that it doesn't always work out, but I learned something or I met somebody. And one thing always does actually lead to another. And so if you don't jump out and get beat up sometime, you don't have great stories to tell. And then you always get to learn new skills anyway. Even if I get a job and it's a bad situation, I learned a lot of big things that it'll play into the next thing. So that's me.
We can learn a lot from you.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, we interact with students every day that didn't have the benefit of someone speaking life into them, right? They're being told they're not good enough, you know, that you don't need to graduate high school.
Right.
You know, and that's how some of the poverty becomes generational, right? Is it's just the expectation for their life.
Right.
You had a very opposite experience growing up. What would be your biggest piece of advice for somebody who's in that situation and just being told that their life is going to be hopeless?
I would say as fast as you can, get around different people. That's really the key. Because some people, because they're a loser, they want you to be a loser or they want you to think you are. And you have to just get away from them. You have to find that one teacher, that one coach, that one cool neighbor, that one aunt, somebody out there that doesn't speak that. And even here, like we get kids' transcripts, and I've seen kids' transcripts, and I've been livid that any high school allowed that kid to think they're an F student. It's like, no, you help them. They could be taught that. And so anyway, I would say with the kids, you have to find people who will speak something speak life into you, speak hope into you. Find those people and grab a hold of them. And you just have to really ignore the other voices, because the other voices are lying and they're holding you back. You just can't. You've only got one shot. You get to be a kid once. You get to be a teenager once. You can't allow those people to hold you back, because when you're going to be 20 again, I think you have to get angry about it, angry enough to say, this isn't going to define my life. And you have to get angry enough to do something to push yourself forward. I would say that's it.
Yeah, that's such good advice. I mean, it's the old saying that you are who your friends are.
You really are.
And when you're striving for something more, it's going to require that you have friends that are moving in the direction you want to move. It can happen both ways, right? In a positive and a negative way. So it's so important to choose friends wisely, that are going to, help you get to where you want to go, and for you to help them get where they want to go. Just the mutual.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it might be someone a lot older, like you don't think about, like you think about peers, like high school kids. It was grown-ups that I felt like they were the greatest people to speak vision to me, not kids who were my age. That's why I wanted to learn from like every boss, every manager, my friends' parents, stuff like that. So I would say with kids, they have to get angry enough about their situation to say, this is not going to define my future. And then they have to say, who out there will speak some kind of hope into me, and go grab a hold of that person.
Our mom used to always tell me, if you run with dogs, you get fleas. Such a true statement, whether, running with the wrong crowd or running with the right, you're going to catch whatever's
Right.
being thrown out there.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I would say another thing that's really key is you can't blame other people. And sometimes when I'm talking to someone and I hear them even, well, this happened because at that school, it's like, they'll blame anyone, even if it is their fault. Like our childhood was hideous and it was my dad's fault. But you can't spend time on that. So don't blame other people. Say, but what can I be doing? Mm-hmm. Who can I get to invest in me? What steps can I take? And just don't waste your time blaming, all the what ifs on other things that people have done that have knocked you down or held you back. Just use that as fuel to get angry and keep moving forward.
Yeah. Well, and I think really the lesson that's intertwined in all of this is mindset matters. The words that are spoken to us matter. The words that we are speaking matter, and can at some level create, right? If we're receiving all this negative input and putting out a lot of negativity, there's probably going to be a lot of negativity in your life. And the inverse is true. If it's positive input, speaking positive out, being grateful, having that mindset of positivity and striving, and knowing that with the right people in your life, with putting the work in, you can get there. That's what sets the trajectory, not the circumstances.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely right.
that's an important life lesson.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that was interesting for me too is my sister Pam, who's actually really like reserved and shy. She figured out how we could go to college. And I don't know that I would have ever been able to figure that out. And so I really thank her a lot for, she figured out how we could get loans and grants and stuff because of our income. And we went away to college and we couldn't afford it and we were broke the whole time. But it literally just launched us into a different world. And so I thank God for my sister. And she would say that she was glad for me because I was the bold, spunky one, just get us in any kind of situation. But she really did the hard work to figure out, how do you register for college? How do you even pull that off when we were really behind and we were just broke? But we did it. And we moved out on our own and went to school, and it was a really big thing. And so my sister's investment, it was a big thing for me, my sister Pam.
She was the operations director, and you were
I was
the custodial coordinator.
That's the salad.
That's the boots.
Yes, he was your agent, and we did it.
So you guys went together at the same time.
We went away to college together.
How
So we were in the dorm together. I was real messy, and then she decided she didn't want to live with someone that messy. And so, but we shared a car, and we would literally dig for change in the couch cushions to put gas in our Volkswagen. And then we figured out if you work at restaurants, they feed you. And so we would wait tables and go to college, and then we got an apartment and stuff. And so, yeah, and she went on and got a master's degree. I mean, it's been amazing to see what she's done, and then the things that I got to do with my life was really surprising. But it had a lot to do with us having the nerve to go to college.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a huge risk to take.
It was
Because we've not seen it done before.
and we were not prepared. You know, because we grew up in a real limited education. We didn't know how to write essays. Nobody even said that. We didn't know how to do those things. And so we were like trying to figure all this out in college, but we did it.
Made it. That's incredible. Well, we certainly appreciate you sharing your story. I think that one of the things that I always appreciate about you is your passion and energy that you bring to our team every day. Your zeal for life, the curiosity that you have, like as you're telling your story about how you interviewed everybody, I'm like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, there's never been a time when you're like, oh, I talked to this student last night and it's similar to another student. Like every student is a unique, fun, exciting story.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we just really appreciate that. It brings an energy to the organization that we just love. It's irreplaceable. And knowing that you're the first person they're talking to when they see our ads I think that's a blessing for them and for us as an organization. So thank you for all that you do. And thank you for being on the show today. It was fun and exciting.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks for having me on this team. I love it. I love it.